My name is Renata Josephine Caldwell. I am 34 years old. I am a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. 6 years. 6 years of night shifts of holding strangers' hands while their hearts gave out of memorizing every symptom, every warning sign, every number on every monitor. I knew what a body looked like when something was wrong with it. I just didn't know it was happening to mine. On a Tuesday morning in late November, I collapsed in the hallway of my own hospital, in my scrubs, badge still clipped to my chest. The same hallway I had walked 1,000 times. Dr. Kwame Asante was the one who caught my chart. He pulled up my blood work on that screen and I watched his hands stop moving on the keyboard. He read it once, then he read it again. Then he looked up at me, and in 5 years of working alongside that man, I had never seen that expression on his face before. Not once.
Renata, someone has been doing this to you on purpose for a long time.
The thing that almost erased me was not his fists. It was the soup she made me every single morning. Drop your city and your local time in the comments right now. I want to know who's sitting with me tonight. Subscribe if you're new and please stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your jaw drop and your blood boil. But to understand what those test results meant and who put those numbers there, I need to take you back 5 years, back to the woman I was before I started disappearing. Because I was good, honey. I was whole, and I had no idea what was already being planned for me. 5 years ago, I was the kind of woman who had a plan for everything. I had a color-coded planner on my kitchen counter. I had a savings account I added to every single paycheck without fail. I had a skincare routine, a meal prep schedule, and a 5-year career roadmap I had typed up and printed out and taped inside my closet door.
Renata baby, you plan so much you probably got a backup plan for your backup plan.
My mama used to say, and she was not wrong. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of city that gets into your bones whether you want it to or not. Spanish moss and salt air and Sunday dinners that started at noon and didn't end until the sun went down. My mama Claudette worked as a medical billing specialist for 22 years. My daddy, Reverend Harold Caldwell, preached at First Missionary Baptist every Sunday morning and coached youth basketball on Saturday afternoons. They were not wealthy people, but they were solid. They were the kind of parents who made you feel like the ground beneath your feet was never going to give way. I was the oldest of 2. My sister Simone, 4 years younger, 3 inches shorter, and about 10 times louder than me, was my best friend from the time she could walk. Where I was careful and methodical, Simone was all instinct and nerve. She said what she thought before she finished thinking it. She laughed at everything, including things that weren't funny, just because laughing felt better than the alternative. I loved her in the way you only love someone who has seen every version of you and stayed anyway. I went to Spelman College on a partial academic scholarship, studied nursing, graduated with honors, moved to Atlanta at 23, and started at Grady Memorial as a floor nurse working the medical surgical unit. By the time I was 28, I had been promoted to charge nurse on the overnight shift. I was good at my job in the way that went beyond technical skill. I noticed things. The patient in room 414 who always tensed her jaw slightly before she said she was fine. The family in the waiting room who asked the same question 3 different ways because they didn't understand the answer the first 2 times. I paid attention. It was the thing I was most proud of about myself. I was 34 years old, making $68,000 a year, living in a clean 2-bedroom apartment in East Point with a little balcony where I grew tomatoes in the summer. I had good friends. I had my church. I had Simone 10 minutes away. I was by any honest measure doing well. That was the woman Darnell Marcus Okafor met at a mutual friend's cookout on a Saturday afternoon in June. He was tall, 6 feet 2 inches broad-shouldered with a smile that took its time arriving, but landed like it meant something when it did. He worked as a construction site manager, managed crews, oversaw timelines, handled contractors. He talked about his work with a quiet pride that I found attractive. Not bragging, just a man who knew what he did and did it well. He was funny without trying too hard. He remembered details the second time we talked. He asked about a patient I had mentioned only in passing the week before some elderly man who reminded me of my grandfather. He had remembered. That meant something to me. We dated for 11 months before he proposed.
Will you marry me?
I said yes on a Tuesday night in his kitchen in my pajamas eating leftover pasta. No grand gesture, just him looking at me across the table and asking like it was the most natural thing in the world. We married in April, 60 guests. My daddy officiated. Simone was my maid of honor and cried through her entire speech and made everyone else cry too. The first year was good, genuinely good. We rented a house in East Point, 2 bedrooms, a small yard, hardwood floors that creaked in the hallway in a way I came to love. Darnell cooked on Sunday mornings. He made these eggs with peppers and onions that I still think about. We watched movies on Friday nights and argued about whose turn it was to pick, and neither of us really cared who won. We talked, long conversations about nothing that somehow felt like everything. His mother, Gloria Adayeze Okafor, came into our lives early and came in warmly. She was a compact, sharp-eyed woman in her early 60s, originally from Enugu, Nigeria, who had raised Darnell alone after his father left when Darnell was 9 years old. She lived 40 minutes away in Decatur and visited most weekends. She brought food every single time, jollof rice, egusi soup, fried plantains. She taught me how to make her pepper soup and stood behind me at the stove correcting my technique with the patience of a woman who took cooking seriously as a form of love. I liked her. I want to be honest about that. In the beginning, I genuinely liked Gloria Okafor. She had warmth and humor, and she called me daughter from the 3rd visit onward, and it didn't feel false. I let it in. I was grateful for it. Simone, for the record, was not impressed from day one.
Something's off about that man's mama.
She told me about 3 months into the marriage, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee.
She's too present. She's always just there.
She raised him alone, Simone. He's her only child. Give her some grace. Simone looked at me with that expression she had, the one where she didn't push, but she didn't let go either.
I'm just saying, watch.
I filed it under sisterly overprotectiveness and moved on. Looking back now, Simone saw something I refused to see. She always did. The first sign came quietly, the way the first signs always do. About 8 months into the marriage, I started feeling tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. Not the bone-deep exhaustion of long shifts. I knew that feeling and knew how to manage it. This was different. A heaviness that sat behind my eyes from the moment I woke up. Mild nausea some mornings after breakfast. A slight unsteadiness when I stood up too fast. I told myself it was the adjustment of married life. The schedule changes. The emotional labor of building a home with another person. I was a nurse. I ran through the differential in my head the way I would for any patient, and I landed on the most logical explanation. Stress disrupted sleep patterns, iron levels possibly low. I started taking a daily iron supplement and drank more water and told myself I would feel better by the end of the month. I did not feel better by the end of the month, but I was busy, and I was happy enough. And I had a plan, remember. I always had a plan. What I did not have, what I could not have imagined I needed, was a plan for the possibility that the tiredness was not coming from inside me, that it was being put there from the outside. One spoonful at a time. The first time Darnell hit me, I told myself it was an accident. I know how that sounds. I am a nurse. I have sat with patients in triage and listened to them say the exact same thing, and I have written it in the chart and looked at the bruise and known. I have known. And I sat there in my own bathroom 11 months into my marriage, pressing a cold washcloth against my shoulder, and I told myself the same lie I had heard 100 times from other women's mouths. It was an accident. He didn't mean it. He's under a lot of stress. Let me back up. The second year of our marriage was when the temperature started changing. Not all at once. The way a house gets cold in winter, you don't notice the degrees dropping one by one. You just wake up one morning and realize you've been cold for a while. Darnell started asking questions that weren't really questions.
Where were you for the last hour?
He asked when I came home from the grocery store.
Who was that on the phone?
He asked when I hung up with Simone.
Why do you always have to work late?
He asked on the nights my shift ran over because someone coded at 11:30 and I couldn't just walk out the door. The questions had a temperature to them. A low heat underneath the words that I kept telling myself wasn't what it felt like. He started making comments about my job.
You're always so tired when you come home. Maybe that hospital takes too much out of you.
then less small.
You give everything to those patients and you've got nothing left for your own house.
Then one evening, over dinner, out of nowhere, he looked at me and said,
You know, most men wouldn't even let their wives work those kind of hours.
I put my fork down. He smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere.
You know what I mean?
I told myself I didn't know what he meant. Because I did not want to know. 3 weeks later was the night I came home late. It was a Thursday in October. I had a patient, a 62-year-old woman named Miss Dorothy, came in with what looked like a routine UTI and turned out to be sepsis, and we spent 4 hours stabilizing her. I called Darnell at 9 in the evening to tell him I'd be late. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. I texted twice. I got home at 11:47 at night. The house was dark except for the television light coming under the bedroom door. I changed out of my scrubs in the bathroom. I was washing my face when he appeared in the doorway. I could feel the anger coming off him before he said a single word.
11:47.
He said, I texted you, Darnell. I had a critical patient.
You always have a critical patient.
That's my job. That's what He moved fast. 1 second, he was in the doorway, and the next his hand came down hard on my shoulder. Not a punch, not quite a blow, the kind that sent me sideways into the sink. The pain shot down my arm and up into my neck, and I stood there gripping the basin with both hands, breathing. Then he walked out. Just like that. Walked out and closed the bedroom door behind him. I stood in that bathroom for a long time. In the morning, he was different. Soft. Eyes red like he hadn't slept. He made the eggs with peppers and onions and set them in front of me and sat down across the table and said,
Renata, baby, I don't know what came over me. I swear to God.
His voice broke on the last word.
I'm not that man. You know I'm not that man. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
He cried. Actually cried. And I sat there looking at this man I had married in front of my daddy and 60 people who loved us. And I thought about Miss Dorothy, who had almost died the night before, and how short everything was. And I thought about my mama saying, marriage takes work. And I thought about how good the first year had been, how real it had been. I said, don't let it happen again. He promised. He held my hand across the table and promised. It happened again. Not immediately. He gave it 2 months. 2 months of being the man I married, attentive, funny, present. 2 months that were good enough to make me believe the first time had been the aberration, not the pattern. And then it was a pattern. Meanwhile, Gloria's presence in our home increased. She began coming not just on weekends, but midweek. She always had a reason she was passing through. She had made too much food she wanted to check on her son. She started bringing breakfast items. And then somewhere around month 14 of the marriage, she began arriving on mornings when I was home after a night shift with a container of hot soup.
For your strength, daughter, you work so hard you need to eat.
The soup was always the same, a rich dark broth with greens and root vegetables and a slight earthiness I couldn't quite identify. She called it her restorative blend, something her own mother had made in Nigeria for women who were run down. She would set it on the table and watch me eat it with an attentiveness that I read at the time as love.
You need to slow down, Renata, baby.
She told me one morning sitting across from me while I finished the soup.
All this running around, saving everybody else.
She tilted her head and looked at me with something that wore the shape of concern.
Maybe God is telling you that some women aren't meant to do both, career and home. Maybe something has to give.
I looked at her. I love my job, Gloria.
Of course you do.
She smiled and patted my hand.
I'm just saying, you look tired all the time now. You're not yourself.
I told myself she meant well. By month 16, I was seeing my primary care doctor for the second time about fatigue joint pain in both hands and hair thinning at my temples. My doctor ran a panel. Mild anemia, slightly elevated inflammatory markers. The doctor said, could be early stage thyroid involvement or just chronic stress. She adjusted my iron supplement and recommended I reduce caffeine and try to sleep more consistently. I was a nurse. I looked at those results and I thought plausible. I thought stress will do this. I thought I know what I'm dealing with. The second sign came the way the first one had quietly easy to explain away. I was sitting on the couch one Sunday afternoon when I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had felt like myself. Not tired, but okay. Actually, like myself. Light. Clear-headed. Hungry for things. Simone called that evening. We talked for 40 minutes, the longest we'd spoken in weeks, because Darnell had started making comments whenever I was on the phone with her.
Your sister's always in your ear. She doesn't even like me. Why do you keep letting her pull you away?
Near the end of the call, Simone got quiet in the way she did when she was about to say something she'd been holding.
Rennie, when's the last time you felt like yourself?
I opened my mouth to answer, and I had nothing.
That's what I thought.
She said softly.
I'm coming over Thursday.
She never made it Thursday, because Wednesday night Darnell found out I had been talking to her for 40 minutes, and I learned that 2 months was apparently the longest the pattern was ever going to pause. There is a particular skill that nurses develop over time that nobody teaches you in school. It is the skill of looking completely calm on the outside while your mind is running every worst-case scenario at full speed on the inside. You stand at the bedside with a steady voice and steady hands, and you say, let's just take this one step at a time, while internally you are already 3 steps ahead, calculating, preparing, deciding. I use that skill every day at work. I started using it at home. By the time we were 18 months into the marriage, I had learned how to read Darnell's moods the way I read a patient's vitals. Small fluctuations that meant something was coming, subtle shifts in baseline that told me whether the night was going to be manageable or not. The set of his jaw when he came through the door. Whether he answered my greeting with words or just a sound. Whether he went to the refrigerator first or straight to the bedroom. I had become, without fully realizing it, a woman who managed her husband the way you manage an unstable situation. Carefully, quietly, with constant low-level vigilance. And I told myself that was just marriage. That was just what love required sometimes. That I was strong enough to hold it. I was not strong enough. I was just too exhausted to leave. The hitting had settled into a rhythm by then. It was never random, or rather it felt random, but I came to understand that it had triggers. My job, Simone, coming home late, spending money without consulting him first, disagreeing with him in front of his mother. Any one of these things on the wrong evening could shift the temperature in the house, and I had become very, very good at avoiding them. Gloria had begun coming to the house 4 mornings a week by this point, always with the soup, always watching me eat it. I had stopped questioning the ritual because questioning it felt like ingratitude, and ingratitude was one of the things that made Darnell's jaw set in that particular way. One morning in February, a Tuesday cold and gray, the kind of Atlanta winter that doesn't look impressive but gets into your joints, Darnell left for a site visit at 6:30 in the morning. I had worked a night shift and come home at 7. Gloria arrived at 7:45, letting herself in with the key Darnell had given her without telling me first. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she came in. She set her bag on the counter and began unpacking the container of soup, a small Tupperware of cut fruit, and at the bottom of the bag a dark glass bottle about 3 inches tall with a white screw cap and no label. She moved to the stove back to me, and I watched her uncap the bottle and tap a measure of fine white powder into the soup container before stirring it in. "What's that?" I asked. She turned, and for just one fraction of a second, less than a second, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't trained to watch faces, something moved across her expression. Then it was gone, replaced by that warm, unhurried smile.
Mineral supplement? Good for women's health. My mother used it. I use it now. You use it.
She replaced the cap and dropped the bottle back in her bag.
You're anemic, baby. You need the minerals.
She said it so matter-of-factly, so completely without hesitation. Like there was nothing in the world unusual about a woman adding an unlabeled powder to her daughter-in-law's food. I stood there with my coffee mug, and I thought, she knows I'm a nurse. She knows I ran labs. She is telling me this is a supplement in a tone that does not invite follow-up questions. And then I thought, but she loves you. She calls you daughter. She comes here 4 mornings a week because she cares. And I let it go. I let it go, and I sat down and I ate the soup. Looking back at that moment now from the other side of everything that happened, I want to go back to that kitchen and shake myself by the shoulders. I want to say you are a nurse. You know that anemia has a differential diagnosis. You know that unlabeled powders added to food without consent are not standard nutritional practice. You know what your instincts are telling you. But grief does something to a person's logic. And by that point, I was grieving the marriage I thought I was going to have. Grieving the woman I had been before I started spending my energy managing exits and tracking moods. Grief makes you hold on to the things that still look like love even when the shape of them is wrong. 2 weeks after the kitchen incident, I found the phone. Not Darnell's main phone. A second one, a cheap prepaid tucked inside a rolled-up pair of socks in the back of his drawer. I found it by accident pulling out a clean pair of my own socks from the wrong drawer in my post-night shift fog. I stood there holding it for a long moment. Then I turned it on. It was not what I expected. There were messages, yes, from a woman named Tanya. They were not romantic in the way I had braced myself for. They were something that confused me more than an affair would have. They were complaints, long detailed complaints about me, about our marriage. One message read, "She's always tired. Something's wrong with her, I don't know. She can barely function half the time." Tanya replied, "That's not normal, Dee. You sure she's not just doing it for attention?" And Darnell wrote,
She's not that kind of woman. She's just fragile, I guess. I don't know what happened to her.
Fragile. I read that word 3 times. Renata Josephine Caldwell, charge nurse, the woman who had talked families through the worst moments of their lives without flinching, fragile. My hands were shaking when I put the phone back. That evening, I waited until Darnell was in the shower and I confronted him. Calmly. I told him I had found the phone. I told him about the messages. He came out of the bathroom and looked at me with an expression I had not seen before. Not guilt. Not remorse. Something almost like irritation.
You went through my things.
He said, "You have a second phone, Darnell."
You're imagining something that isn't there. Tanya is a coworker. We talk.
You told her I was fragile.
I was venting. People vent.
He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me levelly.
Renata, I'm genuinely worried about you. You've been sick for months. You're paranoid. You're going through my drawers, baby. This isn't like you. Maybe you need to talk to someone.
I stood there and I felt the floor shift slightly under my feet. Not physically, my balance had been unreliable for weeks, but something else. The particular dizziness of having your own perception questioned by someone who should know you best. I'm not imagining things. I said.
I didn't say you were crazy.
His voice was patient now, carefully, deliberately patient.
I said I'm worried. There's a difference.
He reached out and took my hand and looked at me with something that wore the shape of love. And the worst part, the part that still makes me want to weep for the woman I was in that room, is that I almost believed him. Almost. Because the next morning, Gloria arrived with the soup. And as she stirred it on the stove with her back to me, humming quietly to herself, I watched her reach into that bag. And I thought about the unlabeled bottle, and about the word fragile, and about the fact that my symptoms had started, if I traced them back honestly, right around the time the morning soup became a routine. I thought about all of that. And then I did something I had never done before. I took out my phone and I texted Simone. 4 words.
I need your help.
Simone came over that Thursday, like she had promised. She brought coffee and pastries from the bakery on Cleveland Avenue that we had been going to since we were teenagers. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and listened without interrupting for 45 minutes while I told her everything. The hitting, the second phone, the soup, the bottle with no label, the word fragile sitting in a text message like a verdict. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment.
How long has she been bringing that soup?
About 8 months. She nodded slowly the way she did when she was thinking hard.
And when did you start feeling bad?
I opened my mouth, then closed it. The timeline assembled itself in my mind the way a diagnosis assembles itself symptom by symptom, date by date, until the picture becomes impossible to look away from. The fatigue had started roughly 8 months ago. The joint pain, the hair thinning, the nausea after breakfast. 8 months. Simone.
I know.
She said quietly.
I know, Rennie.
She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. She had taken it 3 months earlier on a Sunday visit while Gloria was in the living room with Darnell. A clear shot of the dark glass bottle with the white cap sitting on my kitchen counter.
I didn't say anything because I didn't have proof. I sent a sample of that soup to a private lab. I scraped it from the container in your recycling bin. The results came back inconclusive. Said it was consistent with herbal compounds.
She looked at me steadily.
But Renata, something is wrong. I know it and you know it.
I sat with that for a long moment. Then Darnell's key turned in the front door. Simone and I had exactly 3 seconds to rearrange our faces before he walked into the kitchen. He looked at Simone the way he always looked at Simone, a cordial coldness like a door that was open just enough to be technically open.
Didn't know you were coming.
He said to her.
Renata invited me.
She said pleasantly. He looked at me. Something moved behind his eyes.
Can I talk to you for a second in the other room?
I followed him to the hallway.
I need you to start letting me know when she's coming. This is my house, too.
She's my sister, Darnell.
She fills your head with things.
He stepped closer, not touching, just close enough.
Every time she leaves, you're different. You're suspicious, you're distant. I need you to see that she's not good for us.
She's my family.
I'm your family.
His voice dropped another register.
Act like it.
He went back to the kitchen and greeted Simone with a smile so warm it would have fooled anyone who hadn't just seen what I'd seen in that hallway. He offered her more coffee. He asked about her job. He was charming and easy and completely convincing. Simone left an hour later. At the door, she hugged me for a beat longer than usual and said quietly into my ear,
I'm not going anywhere, no matter what he says.
2 days later, Darnell told me he didn't want Simone in the house anymore. He didn't yell it. That was the thing about Darnell. The most dangerous moments were never the loud ones. He said it the way you state a fact, sitting at the kitchen table, not looking up from his phone.
I don't want her here. She's toxic to this marriage, and I'm done pretending otherwise.
You don't get to decide who I see. He looked up then, and I knew from the quality of that look what the rest of the evening was going to be. I will not detail every instance of what happened over the following months. I will tell you that it became more frequent, and that it became less careful. Early on, he had been precise in a terrible way, targeting places that clothing covered. That precision began to erode. He was getting less careful, or he was getting less concerned about being careful. And I was not sure which of those was more frightening. I became skilled at things I should never have had to be skilled at. Applying arnica gel in the right sequence to minimize bruising. Choosing my uniform based on coverage rather than comfort. Answering, I'm fine, just tired with a delivery so natural that my colleagues, people who had been trained to detect distress, didn't push. I was a nurse who was lying to nurses. The mornings Gloria came, she would look at me with that sharp-eyed attention of hers and occasionally reach out to touch my face or my hand.
You're so pale, baby. You need to rest more. You need to let Darnell take care of you more.
Once memorably, she cupped my face in both hands and looked at me with an expression of profound tenderness and said,
You know what your problem is, Renata? You're too strong for your own good. Sometimes God has to bring a woman low so she learns to be still.
I thought she was talking about my health. I did not understand yet that she was describing her own plan. My body continued its slow deterioration. By month 22 of the marriage, I had lost 14 pounds I had not intended to lose. My hair had thinned enough that I had started wearing it differently to compensate. I was taking 4 different supplements prescribed by 2 different doctors, who each had a partial picture of what was happening to me. My blood pressure was running low. I had 2 episodes of what my doctor called vasovagal syncope fainting from a standing position, that I attributed to dehydration and long shifts. I was a nurse diagnosing myself incorrectly because I was only looking at the pieces I knew about. At work, I was still functioning, but differently, slower. I compensated with systems, with lists, with double-checking things I used to know by instinct. My colleague and friend Deshawn noticed.
You good, Renata?
He asked me one afternoon in the break room, studying my face with the frank professional concern of someone who takes vital signs for a living.
You look like you've been fighting something for a while.
I'm okay, I said. Just need to get my iron sorted out. He didn't look convinced, but I was good at the performance by then. I had been performing for 2 years. The morning of the collapse, I almost didn't go in. I woke at 5:15 to my alarm and lay still for a moment, taking inventory the way I had learned to do, assessing whether the dizziness was manageable, whether my hands were steady, whether I could get through a 12-hour shift on what my body had available. The verdict was marginal. But I had a patient, a young woman named Aliyah, 26 years old, 3 days post-op from a bowel resection, anxious and in pain and asking for me specifically at handoff. I was not going to leave her without her nurse. I got up. I showered. I put on my scrubs and clipped my badge to my chest. Gloria arrived at 6:45 with the soup. I ate it standing at the counter because I was running late. She watched me the way she always watched me, with that focused, unreadable attention. When I set the container down, she nodded once satisfied.
Good girl. Now go take care of your patients.
I drove to Grady Memorial. I parked in my usual spot in the deck on Jesse Hill Jr. Drive. I walked through the staff entrance and down the hallway toward the unit. And at 6:58 in the morning, somewhere between the elevator bank and the nursing station, the floor came up to meet me. The last thing I remember before the lights went strange was the sound of someone calling my name and the cold of the linoleum against my cheek, and thinking with the detached clarity of a mind that was running out of fuel that something was very, very wrong. Not with my iron levels, not with my thyroid, with the soup. When I came back to consciousness, I was on a gurney in Bay 7 of the Grady Memorial Emergency Department. I knew the ceiling. I had walked under that ceiling 6 years. I knew the particular hum of the fluorescent light above Bay 7 because it had been running slightly off pitch for 3 months, and facilities kept putting in the work order and losing it. I knew the smell of the space antiseptic and recycled air, and something underneath both of those things that you never fully got used to no matter how long you worked there. I knew this place completely, and I had never felt more lost inside it. Kwame was there when I opened my eyes. Dr. Kwame Asante, 41 years old, 14 years at Grady, the kind of physician who moved through a room like he had already accounted for every variable in it. He was standing at the foot of the gurney with a tablet in his hand and an expression on his face that I had never seen there before in 5 years of working alongside him. Not the focused gravity he wore in a trauma, not the careful neutrality he used with difficult family members. Something else. Something that looked on a man like Kwame almost like disbelief. "Hey," I said. My voice came out thin and strange.
Hey,
He set the tablet down on the side table.
how are you feeling?
What happened?
You went down in the hallway. Deshaun caught you before you hit the floor fully. You were out for about 2 minutes.
He paused.
I ran a full panel Renata, CBCCMP, heavy metal screen, everything.
Something in the way he said heavy metal screen made my stomach drop before the rest of my brain caught up. Kwame.
Your cadmium levels are elevated significantly.
He picked the tablet back up and turned it toward me. I looked at the numbers.
This isn't occupational exposure. There's no environmental source that accounts for this concentration. The pattern is consistent with...
He stopped. He looked at me. He said it carefully, the way you say the thing that changes everything.
Renata, this is consistent with chronic oral ingestion. Someone has been putting this in something you eat or drink regularly over an extended period of time.
The room did not spin. That is what I want to tell you. I always assumed that when a person received devastating news, the room spun. The walls moved. Something cinematic happened to the space around them. Nothing cinematic happened. The room stayed completely still. The fluorescent light above Bay 7 continued its slightly off-pitch hum. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor was beeping in the steady, indifferent way monitors beeped. I looked at those numbers on Kwame's tablet, and I looked at them the way I would look at any lab result, not as a woman receiving news, but as a clinician reading data, because that was the only way I could look at them without coming apart completely. Cadmium, a heavy metal, toxic with repeated exposure, accumulates in the kidneys, the liver, the bones. Chronic low-level ingestion produces fatigue, anemia, joint pain, weight loss, hair thinning, orthostatic hypotension. The onset is gradual. The symptoms mimic half a dozen common conditions. It is, if you know what you are doing, almost impossible to detect without specifically looking for it. Someone had specifically not wanted anyone to look for it. I sat up slowly on the gurney and I ran the timeline in my mind with clinical precision. Month 8 of my marriage. Gloria begins bringing the soup, the restorative blend, the unlabeled bottle with the white cap, the mineral supplement that she added before I could see clearly what it was and in what quantity. 8 months of daily ingestion. The fatigue starting at exactly that point. The anemia, the joint pain, the hair at my temples, the 2 fainting episodes, the 14 pounds. Every symptom I had attributed to stress, to long shifts, to the ordinary attrition of a difficult life, every single one of them had a different explanation. The woman who called me daughter had been dismantling me from the inside, one spoonful at a time. I want to tell you that I cried. I think people expect that part of the story, the breakdown, the moment where the grief becomes physical and uncontrollable. And there was grief, yes. There was a grief so large it didn't have a sound yet. But what I felt first sitting on that gurney in Bay 7 with cadmium levels on a tablet screen in front of me was something colder than grief. It was the specific devastation of a person who has been deceived by their own competence. I was a nurse. I had the knowledge. I had the training. I had sat in that body for 2 years while it sent me signals, and I had interpreted every single one of them wrong, not because I was ignorant, but because I had never applied my clinical knowledge to myself, because the possibility that someone who brought me soup and called me daughter was poisoning me had never in the full inventory of my nurse's mind been a differential I was willing to consider. That was what she had counted on. I understood it now with a horrible clarity. Gloria had chosen her method deliberately, not something fast or dramatic that would require a hospital visit and a specific test. Something slow, something that looked like chronic illness, something that a woman's own doctors would chase for years without finding. She had understood that if Renata was tired enough, sick enough, uncertain enough about her own body, Renata would not leave, could not leave, would become, as Darnell had told Tanya in that text message, fragile. She had engineered my fragility. And her son had provided the environment that made leaving feel impossible, even before the cadmium made it feel physically unmanageable. I sat alone in Bay 7 for 23 minutes after Kwame stepped out to make calls. The curtain was drawn. The monitor beeped. I held the tablet with my own results on the screen and I let the full weight of it arrive. 6 years of nursing, watching people survive unimaginable things, holding the hands of people at the absolute bottom of their lives and telling them that the bottom was not the end. Believing that, meaning it every single time. I sat there and I thought, is this my bottom? And then I thought something else. Something that came quietly from somewhere beneath the devastation from whatever part of Renata Josephine Caldwell had survived 2 years of being slowly erased. It was a question. Does Darnell know? The curtain moved, and Simone walked in. She took one look at my face and crossed the room in 3 steps and put both arms around me and held on. She didn't ask what the results said. She didn't speak at all for a long moment. She just held me the way she had held me when our grandfather died, when I failed my first nursing boards, when every hard thing before this had come. Then she pulled back and looked at me, and her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set.
I have something to tell you. I should have told you sooner, and I'm sorry I didn't.
She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone and opened a photo. The dark glass bottle with the white cap. The one she had photographed 3 months ago.
I never stopped trying to find out what was in it. I sent a second sample to a different lab last month, a forensic toxicology lab.
She turned the phone toward me.
The results came back 4 days ago. I didn't know how to tell you.
I looked at the screen. Cadmium acetate. Detected. The room was very quiet.
Renata,
Simone said softly.
what do you want to do?
I looked at my sister. I looked at the results on her phone. I looked at my own results still pulled up on Kwame's tablet on the side table. 2 sets of evidence. 2 laboratories. The same answer. And somewhere in the wreckage of that moment, something inside me went very, very still. Not sad still. Not defeated still. The kind of still that comes just before a person decides. I want to call a lawyer, I said. Vanessa Pruitt arrived at Grady Memorial at 2:17 in the afternoon. Simone had called her. I had never met Vanessa before that day, but Simone had used her 2 years earlier for a contract dispute and had described her as
The kind of woman who makes opposing counsel want to change careers.
She was 51 years old, medium height, with natural hair cut close and precise, and reading glasses on a chain around her neck that she put on and took off with the deliberate energy of someone who used every movement intentionally. She came into Bay 7, shook my hand, pulled a chair directly to my bedside, sat down, opened a legal pad, and said,
Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out.
I talked for 2 hours. Vanessa wrote without looking up. Occasionally, she asked a question, a date, a specific word Darnell had used, the exact sequence of a particular evening. She did not react emotionally to anything I said. She did not wince or shake her head or offer sympathy. She just wrote and asked and wrote. It was in its way one of the most respectful things anyone had done for me in 2 years. She treated every word I said as evidence, as material, as something that had weight and value and use. When I finished, she put her pen down and looked at me over the reading glasses.
Here's what you have. You have documented medical evidence of chronic cadmium poisoning consistent with deliberate oral ingestion. You have a forensic toxicology report obtained independently by your sister corroborating that finding. You have 2 years of physical assault by your husband with a pattern that any competent forensic medical examiner can speak to from your medical records. You have a photograph of the substance. You have the container. What you do not yet have is recorded behavioral evidence from inside the home. And that is what I want.
She outlined the plan with the same quiet efficiency she had used to take my history. I would be discharged in 2 days once my immediate treatment was underway and my levels had been reassessed. I would go home. I would behave exactly as I had been behaving. I would eat nothing Gloria prepared. I would dispose of it without her knowing. And I would give Simone whatever samples I could safely obtain for continued forensic documentation. Quamie would coordinate with a toxicologist at Emory for my ongoing treatment, framed to the outside world as management of a newly diagnosed autoimmune condition. Small cameras, 3 of them no larger than a shirt button, would be installed in the kitchen and the main living area before I returned home. Every conversation, every delivery of soup, every morning visit from Gloria would be recorded. How long? I asked.
3 weeks, maybe 4. Enough to build a pattern that a prosecutor cannot argue away.
She looked at me steadily.
Can you do that? Go back in there and act like nothing has changed.
I thought about 2 years of performing normalcy. 2 years of arranging my face over pain-managing exits, tracking moods, lying to nurses who were trained to detect lies. Yes, I said. I can do that. Vanessa nodded once.
Then we're going to be fine.
After she left, Kwame came back and sat in the chair she had vacated. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet, not uncomfortably, just present.
Detective Sandra Osei is going to want to talk to you. She handles domestic violence cases out of the Atlanta PD. She's good. I know her personally.
He paused.
I also need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as your colleague, not your doctor.
I waited.
I should have seen this. We all should have. You were in this building every shift for 2 years, and none of us.
He stopped.
I'm sorry, Renata.
I looked at him. Kwame. I didn't see it either. I was in my own body. He nodded. But I could see he was going to carry it for a while the way good doctors carried the things they felt they had missed. I understood that feeling completely. That evening alone in the hospital room after Simone had gone home to get clothes and Kwame had finished his shift, I lay in the dark, and I let myself do the thing I had been holding off all day. I thought about the question I had asked in Bay 7 before Simone walked in. Does Darnell know? The honest answer was I didn't know. And the not knowing mattered. Because there were 2 possible versions of my husband. In one version, he was complicit, he had known what his mother was doing, and had allowed it, possibly encouraged it. Because a sick and dependent Renata was easier to control than a healthy one. In the other version, he was a man who had beaten his wife for 2 years and had no idea his mother was poisoning her, which made him a different kind of monster, but a monster nonetheless. Neither version changed what I was going to do, but the question was going to matter in that courtroom. Vanessa had seen it too. That was why, at the end of our meeting, she had asked me to pull up the cloud backup of Darnell's old phone. the one I had access to through a shared family account he had forgotten I was on. And somewhere in that backup time stamped 14 months earlier was a text exchange between Darnell and Gloria.
She's getting too strong. She's asking questions. I am handling it.
Mom, I don't want to know the details. Just fix it. She needs to calm down and stay home.
Just fix it. 3 words. I had read them on Vanessa's legal pad where she had written them down, and they had sat in my chest like something with a temperature. He had not asked what fixing it meant. He had not asked his mother to stop. He had drawn a deliberate line around his own knowledge. I don't want to know the details. And that line was not innocence. That line was a choice. I lay in the dark in that hospital room and I thought about the man who had cried over eggs and peppers and promised me he was not that man. He was exactly that man. He had always been exactly that man. He had simply arranged things so that he could believe otherwise. The next day, Detective Sandra Osei came to my room. She was 43 compact with a calm so deep it felt structural. She had worked domestic violence cases for 11 years. She listened to me the same way Vanessa had, without performance, without drama, treating every word as material. When I finished, she looked at me and said,
"You ready to do this, right?
"Yes."
Then here's what I need from you."
She laid it out, the documentation, the recordings, the chain of evidence.
You stay steady. You don't confront him. You don't change your behavior. You don't give him any reason to think anything has shifted. You just go home and you live your life for 3 more weeks.
I nodded.
And Renata,
She leaned forward slightly.
you stop eating anything that woman brings into that house. I don't care how you do it. You don't eat it.
Understood. She stood to leave and then paused at the curtain.
One more thing. A text message, I don't want to know the details, just fix it. That is going to be very important.
I already knew. The day I was discharged, Darnell came to pick me up. He was solicitous in the hospital, holding my arm, speaking quietly to the discharge nurse, carrying my bag. In the car, he said,
I was scared, Rennie. You can't do that to me.
and I looked out the window at Atlanta moving past, and I said, "I know, I'm sorry." I smiled at him across the center console. He had absolutely no idea what was coming. Let him enjoy his last few weeks of feeling powerful. Let him enjoy every single one. The cameras went in on a Wednesday. Simone handled the installation with a man she knew from her job, a security consultant named Marcus, who did this kind of work professionally and who asked no questions beyond the technical ones. 3 cameras. One mounted inside the upper cabinet above the stove, angled down toward the counter where Gloria always set her bag and prepared the soup. One in the living room bookshelf facing the kitchen doorway. One in the hallway outside the bedroom, capturing the entry and the main traffic of the house. They were smaller than I had imagined, each one no larger than a coat button drawing power from a small battery pack tucked behind the cabinet panel. The footage fed to a secure cloud account that only Vanessa, Sandra, and Simone could access. I did not have the login credentials. That was deliberate Vanessa's decision. If Darnell ever found my phone or my laptop, there would be nothing to find. I came home to a house that looked identical to the one I had left. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment and looked at the stove, the counter, the cabinet above it where the camera was now sitting behind a half-inch gap in the door. Everything the same. Everything completely different. Darnell was behind me.
You okay?
"Just glad to be home," I said, and I smiled at the man who had stood over me for 2 years. I meant none of it, and I delivered it perfectly. The 3 weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner. I watched television beside Darnell on the couch. I laughed at the right moments. I responded to his moods with the practiced attentiveness I had developed over 2 years. None of it was real. All of it was necessary. I was performing a marriage for an audience of cameras, and I was very, very good at it by then. Gloria came 4 mornings that first week. Every morning she unpacked her bag on the counter, took out the dark glass bottle, added the powder to the soup while her back was half turned. Every morning the camera above the stove recorded it in full. Every morning I took the container to the table, sat down. And when Gloria went to the living room to greet Darnell or use the bathroom, I transferred the soup into a sealed specimen container I kept in my uniform pocket. replaced it with the backup bowl of plain broth I had prepared earlier, and ate the plain broth while she watched. She never suspected. Of course she didn't. She was watching a woman she believed she had made compliant. She was watching the result of her own work. The pale skin, the careful movements, the quiet gratitude. She had built those things, and she trusted them completely. What she did not know was that the woman sitting across from her was getting stronger every day. Quaim had me on an aggressive chelation protocol through a private physician treatment designed to bind the cadmium in my system and help my body process it out. I went twice a week, early morning before shifts, and I told Darnell it was follow-up for the autoimmune diagnosis. He accepted it without much interest. He had never been particularly curious about the details of my health, only about the degree to which it affected him. By the end of the second week, I could feel the difference. A clarity returning behind my eyes, a steadiness in my hands that had not been there in months. Small things. But to a body that had been running on diminished fuel for 2 years, they felt enormous. I stood in the bathroom mirror one morning and looked at myself and thought, there you are. There you actually are. Meanwhile, Darnell reached the apex of his confidence. Looking back, I think the hospital collapse had reassured him in some fundamental way. In his understanding of our dynamic, the collapse meant fragility confirmed. Fragility confirmed meant she is not going anywhere. She cannot go anywhere. And a man who believes his wife cannot leave him becomes, in my experience, a man who stops being careful. He stopped being careful. One evening in the second week, he was on the phone with someone. I never learned who. I was in the kitchen, and I could hear him in the bedroom voice carrying through the door he had left partially open.
She's not going anywhere. Where would she go? She can barely function on her own. She needs me whether she wants to admit it or not.
A pause.
Some women just need to be managed. You know what I'm saying? That's just how it is.
The camera in the hallway got every word. The next morning, Gloria arrived and made the soup. I went through the motions. She sat across from me and watched me eat with that focused attention of hers. Then she reached over and patted my hand.
You look a little better this week, baby. A little more color.
I feel better, I said. Thank you for taking such good care of me.
She smiled. That's what family is for.
I smiled back. The camera above the stove got that too. On the Thursday of the third week, Vanessa called me at work.
We have everything we need. The forensic toxicology on the soup samples is complete. The cadmium acetate is confirmed across 5 separate samples spanning 3 weeks, consistent with deliberate and repeated administration. The video evidence documents the preparation on 11 separate occasions. The audio from the hallway camera is clean and usable.
She paused.
And Sandra has completed her investigation on the physical assault documentation. The medical records, the photographs Simone took of your injuries over the past 18 months, and 2 statements from your colleagues at Grady who observed signs consistent with abuse. It is a complete package.
I was standing in the break room at Grady. Deshaun was at the coffee machine with his back to me. When? I asked.
The emergency protective order hearing is Monday morning, 9 o'clock, Fulton County Courthouse.
Another pause.
I also need to tell you something about the hearing. The DA's office has reviewed the evidence, and they are pursuing criminal charges against Gloria Okafor separately. Sandra will coordinate the arrest to occur simultaneously with the hearing.
I sat down in the break room chair.
Renata, are you ready for Monday?
I thought about Bay 7, the numbers on Kwame's screen, the word fragile in a text message. 3 years of a body being taken apart by 2 people who had both decided in their different ways that I was something to be managed rather than someone to be reckoned with. I've been ready, I said. That Sunday evening, I sat on my small balcony, the one that looked out over the backyard where nothing grew because I had not had the energy to tend anything in 2 years. And I watched the last of the October light go down over East Point. Darnell was inside watching football. He had said something cutting at dinner, a small cruelty, almost casual.
You know, for a nurse, you really don't take very good care of yourself. What does that say about your judgment?
He had laughed after he said it, like it was a joke, and gone back to his food. I had said nothing. I had looked at my plate and said nothing. But I had thought, say it again. Say every single word of it again. Say it tomorrow. In that courthouse. When Vanessa reads it into the record, say it in front of the judge. I want every word of it on paper. I sat on the balcony in the dark, and I was not afraid. For the first time in 3 years, I was not afraid of what the next day would bring. I was counting down to it. Fulton County Courthouse on a Monday morning in late October looks exactly like justice is supposed to look. Gray stone, high ceilings. The particular hush of a building where consequential things happen regularly enough that the walls have absorbed it. I arrived at 8:30 with Vanessa on my left and Simone on my right. I wore a navy dress and low heels. I had done my hair the way I used to wear it before the thinning started, pulled back clean and simple. The way a woman wears her hair when she has nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Darnell arrived at 8:52 with his attorney, a man named Gerald Hutchins, who had a reputation for aggressive defense work in family court. Darnell was in a charcoal suit. He looked good, composed. He caught my eye across the lobby and held it for a moment with an expression I had seen before. The one that said, "I know something you don't." The one that said, "I have already won this." He'd been telling people Vanessa had learned through discovery that I was having a mental health crisis, that the collapse at the hospital was stress-induced, that the claims of abuse were the product of a disturbed mind exacerbated by an undiagnosed autoimmune condition that was affecting my cognition. He had been building his narrative for weeks. He was still building it when we walked into that courtroom. Gloria was in the gallery behind him. She was dressed in a dark green church suit, hands folded in her lap, the picture of a concerned and dignified elder. She caught my eye too. Her expression was softer than Darnell's, almost pitying. The look of a woman who believed she was watching someone make a catastrophic and irreversible mistake. I looked at them both. Then I sat down. I opened the folder Vanessa had prepared for me, and I waited. The hearing opened with Hutchins presenting Darnell's position. He was smooth. He used words like fragile and unstable and delusional, with a practiced fluency that made them sound clinical rather than cruel. He cited my collapse as evidence of mental deterioration. He cited my estrangement from Simone as evidence of social dysfunction. He painted a portrait of a devoted husband managing a wife whose grip on reality had become unreliable. Darnell sat beside him and nodded at appropriate intervals. Calm, certain, the picture of a reasonable man. At one point, Hutchins said,
"My client has been nothing but patient and supportive throughout his wife's ongoing health difficulties. He has frankly given more than most men would."
And Darnell, I watched him do it. He turned and looked directly at me across the room and smiled. That smile. The same smile from the night he walked out of the bathroom after hitting me for the first time. The same smile that said, "What are you going to do about it?" He was at the absolute peak of his certainty. The apex of a man who believed the story he was telling was the only story in the room. It was the last moment he would ever feel that way. Vanessa stood up. She presented the medical evidence first. My cadmium levels at admission, the toxicologist's report. The timeline of symptoms mapped precisely against the timeline of Gloria's soup deliveries. She put it on a screen where the judge could see it clearly. She was unhurried, methodical. She let the numbers speak at full volume before she added a single word of interpretation. Then she presented the forensic toxicology reports, 5 soup samples, 5 confirmations of cadmium acetate, dates, concentrations, chain of custody documentation, signed by a certified forensic laboratory in Marietta. Then she presented the video, 11 clips, each one showing Gloria at the counter above the stove, each one showing the dark glass bottle, each one showing the powder going into the soup, dates and timestamps in the corner of every frame, crystal clear. I watched Darnell's attorney's pen go still on his legal pad. I watched Darnell's face. The color did not drain gradually. It went, all at once, like a light switching off. The confidence, the composure, the careful architecture of a man who believed he controlled the room. It collapsed so completely and so fast that what was left looked almost unrecognizable. His jaw went slack. His eyes moved from the screen to his mother in the gallery and back to the screen. His hands folded on the table in front of him began to shake. Not a tremor, a shake. visible from where I was sitting. Vanessa let the last clip run to its end. Then she turned to the judge.
Your Honor, I would now like to present People's Exhibit 14.
She read the text messages.
She is getting too strong. She is asking questions. I am handling it.
And then Darnell's reply.
Mom, I don't want to know the details. Just fix it. She needs to calm down and stay home.
The room was absolutely silent. And then it wasn't. Because Darnell Okafor stood up, not with dignity. He stood up the way a man stands up when the floor has disappeared beneath him. His chair scraped back hard. His attorney grabbed his arm. Darnell shook him off and turned not to the judge, not to Vanessa. He turned to the gallery, to his mother.
What did you do?
His voice cracked down the middle.
What did you actually do? I told you to talk to her, to calm her down. I didn't tell you to...
He stopped. He was breathing hard.
Mom, what did you put in her food?
Gloria sat in the gallery in her dark green church suit, and for one long moment she said nothing. She looked at her son with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not warmth, not the focused inventory she turned on me every morning. Something rawer than that. Then she said quietly but clearly enough for the entire room to hear.
I did what you asked me to do. You said fix it. I fixed it.
Darnell stared at her.
You knew. You knew something was happening. You said you didn't want details. That is not the same as not knowing, Darnell. Don't you stand there and make me the only villain in this room.
Two people, one truth, coming apart in opposite directions in front of a judge and a full gallery. Simone sitting beside me with tears running silently down her face. Hutchins was on his feet trying to contain it. The judge was speaking. Gloria was still talking, her voice climbing. Darnell shaking his head, his hands gripping the back of his chair hard enough that his knuckles had gone pale.
Vanessa leaned close to me and said quietly, "Don't react. Just let it happen."
I was not reacting. I was watching. I watched the judge call order. I watched two bailiffs move toward the gallery where Detective Sandra Ose had entered through the side door with two uniformed officers behind her. I watched Sandra approach Gloria with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had done this many times. I watched Gloria stand slowly. I watched the handcuffs go on. I watched her look at her son one final time, with an expression that was supposed to be accusation, but came out as something much more complicated than that. Then Sandra looked at Darnell.
Mr. Okafor, we'll need you to come with us as well.
Hutchins began talking rapidly about process and procedure. Darnell was not listening. Darnell was looking at me. For the first time since I had known him, he had nothing in his face. No anger, no certainty, no performance of reasonableness. Just a man standing in the rubble of every choice he had made, looking at the woman he had spent 3 years trying to reduce to nothing.
Renata.
Just my name. Like a question he didn't know how to finish. I stood up. I straightened my dress. I picked up my folder. And I looked at him across that room with a steadiness I had earned the hard way, one day at a time. In the body he and his mother had tried to destroy. You told someone I was fragile. I said, you were wrong about that. You were wrong about everything. I turned and walked toward the door. He said my name again behind me. I did not turn around. Vanessa caught up to me in the hallway. Simone was already there. She grabbed both my hands, and for a moment we just stood there in the gray stone corridor of Fulton County Courthouse, while the sounds of everything falling apart continued on the other side of those doors.
"It's done,"
Vanessa said. I looked at my hands and Simone's. Steady. Both of them completely steady. Yes, I said, it is. 6 months later, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in Inman Park, 2nd floor. Hardwood floors that did not creak. A kitchen with a window above the sink that looked out into a courtyard where someone had planted rosemary and lavender along the fence line. And in the morning, when the light came through that window at a certain angle, the whole kitchen smelled like something that had decided to keep growing despite everything. I stood in that empty apartment with the keys in my hand and I cried for about 4 minutes. Not from sadness. From the particular relief of a woman who has been holding her breath for 3 years and has finally been given permission to exhale. Then I called Simone and told her to bring boxes. The legal outcomes came in pieces over those 6 months, the way these things do. Gloria Adizi Okafor was charged with aggravated battery and criminal administration of a toxic substance under Georgia law. She accepted a plea agreement, 18 months of supervised probation, mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment, and a permanent restraining order, keeping her no less than 500 feet from me at all times. Her attorney had argued for pure dismissal on the grounds that she had acted out of a misguided maternal protectiveness. The judge was not moved. Misguided maternal protectiveness, he said at sentencing, does not involve cadmium acetate and a deliberate 2-year campaign of concealment. I was not in the courtroom for her sentencing. I did not need to be. Darnell Marcus Okafor was charged with aggravated assault and 2 counts of felony battery supported by 2 years of medical documentation, photographic evidence and witness statements from 3 of my colleagues at Grady who had observed and documented signs of abuse without fully understanding what they were seeing at the time. He received a 2-year suspended sentence, mandatory completion of a certified batterer intervention program, and a permanent protective order. He lost his position at the construction firm within 2 weeks of the charges becoming public. The last I heard, he was living in a 1-room rental in College Park working a cash job somewhere with no one from his former life willing to take his calls. The woman he had told someone was fragile was sleeping 8 hours a night in her own apartment and growing tomatoes on her balcony again. I returned to Grady Memorial on a Thursday morning in April. I had been on medical leave for 4 months, the collation treatment, the recovery, the legal proceedings. I walked through the staff entrance on Jesse Hill Jr. Drive, the same door I had walked through the morning I collapsed, and I went down the hallway, and when I pushed through the doors to the medical surgical unit, Deshaun was at the nursing station. He looked up, and then he stood up, and then he started clapping. Not performatively, just one person clapping because they meant it. 3 seconds later, the 2 other nurses at the station joined in, and then Kwame appeared from the doorway of a patient room and leaned against the frame with his arms crossed and a smile I had not seen on his face before.
"Welcome back, Nurse Caldwell," he said.
I stood there in my scrubs with my badge clipped to my chest, and I felt something move through me that I do not have a precise clinical term for. It was not happiness exactly, though happiness was part of it. It was more like recognition. The feeling of a body returning to the work it was built for in the place where it belongs, after a long time of being somewhere it did not belong at all. I went back to my patients. Simone and I resumed our Sunday brunches at the restaurant on Auburn Avenue that we had been going to before Darnell decided Simone was a threat to his control. We sat there that first Sunday back and ordered the same things we always ordered: shrimp and grits for her, the salmon scramble for me. And we talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing the way we always had. And nobody called me away, and nobody monitored how long I was on the phone, and nobody made me feel that an hour with my own sister was something I needed to justify. I did not realize how much I had missed just being someone's sister until I had it back. My mother, Claudette, drove up from Savannah on a Saturday in May with a carload of houseplants and spent the weekend arranging them in my new apartment and cooking things in my new kitchen, and occasionally stopping in the middle of whatever she was doing to look at me with an expression that I understood completely because I am her daughter, and I know her face better than almost any face in the world. It was the look of a woman who had been frightened for her child and was only now slowly beginning to breathe again. My daddy called every Sunday. He didn't always say much. Sometimes he just asked how I was sleeping and whether I had eaten well that week. But I understood what the calls were for, and I answered them every time. There are things I know now that I did not know when I walked into a courtyard cookout in June 5 years ago and met a tall man with a slow smile. I know that cruelty rarely announces itself. It arrives in small increments dressed in the clothes of love, and it asks you to be reasonable about each individual increment, and by the time you see the whole picture, you have already been standing inside it for a long time. I know that the people who are most dangerous to us are not always the ones who look dangerous. Sometimes they are the ones who bring soup. Sometimes they are the ones who cry at the kitchen table and promise you they are not that person. Sometimes they are the ones who call you daughter. I know that being skilled, educated, and self-aware does not protect you from these things. I was a nurse. I knew how to read symptoms. I knew the literature on coercive control, and I still did not see it clearly until my own body gave out in a hospital hallway. That is not a failure of intelligence. That is what sustained psychological manipulation and physical trauma do to a person's ability to trust their own perception. Understanding that distinction took me a long time. I am still working on it. And I know this with a certainty that lives in my bones now, not just in my mind, that the bottom is not the end. I have been at the bottom. I know what it looks like, and what it smells like, and what the linoleum feels like against your cheek when your body has finally run out of the fuel to keep performing. I know what it is to have your own self taken apart piece by people who were supposed to love you, and I am still here, steadier than I have ever been, clear in a way I did not know I was capable of. If you are listening to this right now and something in this story has found you, if some part of what I have described feels familiar in a way you are not ready to say out loud yet, I want you to hear this. You are not imagining it. Your body is not lying to you. The tiredness is real. The confusion is real. What is being done to you is real. And you are worth saving. Not when you're stronger. Not when the time is better. Right now, exactly as you are. Find your Simone. Find your Kwame. Find your Vanessa. They exist. I promise you they exist. My name is Renata Josephine Caldwell. I am 34 years old. I am a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a daughter and a sister and a woman who grows tomatoes on her balcony and sleeps without listening for footsteps in the hallway. I am someone who was taken apart and put herself back together, and the woman who came out the other side is someone I am still getting to know and already deeply proud of. I am not what was done to me. I am what I chose to become. And I am nobody's fragile thing. Not anymore. Not ever again. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever stayed somewhere longer than you should have? Because leaving felt impossible. Your words matter here. This is a safe space. And if you are new to this channel, please subscribe because every story I tell is for someone who needs to hear it. You being here means everything.